The clash between privilege and truth can reshape lives, especially in a system where fairness is a luxury rather than a right. In Unraveled Justice, 15-year-old Elijah Carter finds himself ensnared in a cruel lie when his literature teacher, Ms. Vivian Monroe, falsely accuses him of cheating to shield her prize student. As Elijah watches his dreams collapse under the weight of this injustice, one question lingers in the halls of Westbrook High. Can truth prevail when the very system meant to uphold it is rigged against you? This is a powerful story of courage, betrayal, and a relentless fight for truth. Watch or listen to the full story to witness Elijah's journey and discover whether justice can overcome prejudice. Chapter 1. A Loaded Deck. The fluorescent lights of Westbrook High School cast a harsh glare on the polished floors. Elijah Carter adjusted his worn backpack, its frayed straps digging into his shoulders as he made his way to Ms. Monroe's advanced literature class. At 15, Elijah carried himself with quiet dignity, despite the challenges that marked his path. "Watch it, scholarship kid," sneered Nathan Whitmore, brushing past with a smirk. The 16-year-old moved through the school like he owned it, perhaps because in a way he did. His father's generous donations had built the new science wing, and that privilege followed him everywhere. Elijah exhaled sharply and pressed forward. Today's essay was too important to let Nathan's words get under his skin. His mother had stayed up late, exhausted from working double shifts, to help him refine his arguments. A scholarship was his ticket out, and every grade mattered. Inside the classroom, Ms. Monroe adjusted her designer glasses as students filed in. At 43, she commanded the room with effortless authority, her perfectly highlighted blonde hair never out of place. She greeted Nathan warmly as he sauntered in late, but when Elijah quietly took his seat, her expression hardened. "Today we'll discuss Steinbeck's take on social inequality," Ms. Monroe announced, scanning the room before settling her gaze on Nathan. "Would you like to start?" Nathan flashed a practiced smile. "Of course, Ms. Monroe." Elijah watched as Nathan delivered a rambling, unprepared analysis. Ms. Monroe nodded approvingly, her admiration unwavering. "Excellent work, Nathan," she gushed. "That's college-level thinking." When Elijah's turn came, he spoke passionately about systemic barriers and resilience, drawing insightful parallels to modern society. Several students nodded in agreement, but Ms. Monroe's face remained impassive. "That was adequate, Elijah," she remarked. "But you missed several key literary devices. More thorough preparation would help." A familiar sting burned in Elijah's chest, but he nodded politely. "Yes, ma'am." As class ended, Principal Matthew Grayson passed by the doorway. At 63, his distinguished gray hair and upright posture commanded respect. His sharp eyes briefly met Elijah's before he continued down the hall. "Did you see that?" Nathan whispered to his friends. "Grayson's in my dad's pocket after that last donation." Elijah packed his essay into his folder. One day, he thought, his work would speak for itself. One day, no one would be able to ignore his voice. He didn't notice Ms. Monroe watching him, irritation flickering behind her eyes, an irritation that looked alarmingly like contempt. Chapter 2. The Setup. The next morning, Ms. Monroe returned the previous week's research papers. Her heels clicked against the tile floor as she handed Nathan his essay. "Exceptional work, Nathan," she announced loudly. "A perfect A+. Nathan barely glanced at it before shoving it into his backpack. Elijah, however, noticed the red ink bleeding through the pages, corrections that somehow hadn't affected Nathan's perfect grade. When Ms. Monroe reached Elijah's desk, her smile vanished. She dropped his paper without comment. Turning it over, Elijah's stomach sank. A B-, with a terse note in the margin, lacks sophistication. Weeks of research, late nights at the public library, and meticulous citations, dismissed with a single vague critique. Elijah raised his hand. "Ms. Monroe, could you clarify what aspects of my paper lack sophistication?" Ms. Monroe sighed. This isn't the time for individual critiques. If you're unhappy with your grade, put in more effort. From across the room, Nathan smirked. Guess some people just can't handle high standards. The class fell silent. Elijah gritted his teeth, willing himself to stay composed. Later in the hallway, Zoe Chong, a quiet but observant student, hesitated before approaching Elijah. I read your paper, she whispered. It was the best in the class. Elijah blinked. Thanks, MS. Monroe didn't think so. Zoe bit her lip. She has preferences. That night, Elijah stared at his paper while his mother cooked dinner in their small apartment. What's wrong, baby? She asked. He sighed. MS. Monroe. No matter what I do, she never sees my work. His mother wiped her hands and sat beside him. Some people will never see your light. That doesn't mean you stop shining. Elijah nodded. Tomorrow was another day. Another chance to prove himself, even if MS. Monroe refused to see it. Chapter 3. The Accusation. The midterm exam was grueling, but Elijah was prepared. He wrote carefully, conscious that MS. Monroe would seize on any mistake. A few rows back, Nathan panicked. He had partied instead of studying, confident his charm would carry him. Now, faced with questions he couldn't answer, he discreetly pulled out a hidden reference book. MS. Monroe's heels clicked as she patrolled the rows. She paused behind Nathan. Elijah looked up just in time to see her notice the book. Their eyes met, hers widening in alarm, then narrowing with calculation. She walked on. Halfway through the exam, Principal Grayson entered. I'm observing AP classes during midterms, he announced. MS. Monroe smiled tightly. Of course, Principal Grayson. As she moved down the aisle, she leaned close to Nathan and whispered something. Nathan nodded. Moments later, Nathan raised his hand. May I sharpen my pencil? Of course, MS. Monroe replied. As he walked past Elijah's desk, Nathan dropped something beside him. So quick, it was almost imperceptible. Minutes later, MS. Monroe gasped loudly. What is this? She bent down and straightened, holding the reference book Nathan had been using. Elijah Carter, cheating on the midterm exam. Elijah's head snapped up. What? That's not mine. MS. Monroe's lips curled. Principal Grayson, I have a zero-tolerance policy. We can't let certain students think the rules don't apply to them. Principal Grayson studied Elijah. His instinct screamed something wasn't right, but the evidence was damning. Elijah, gather your things, he said heavily. We'll discuss this in my office. The classroom buzzed with whispers as Elijah's world crumbled.